Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sibilix and welcome to the channel. Alright, so this survey focuses on the informal retail of LPG, commonly known as gas, formal, relatively small businesses operating in a relatively relaxed manner as compared to the formal like branded petrol stations and their more established agents like supermarkets. So the business involves consumers exchanging their empty gas cylinders with a full-filled cylinder at a fee. The retailer takes the empty cylinder to a wholesaler who refills it at an agreed price, then sells it to the next customer. Gas retail, as of the nature of a common in estates and small towns, where the dealer are independent, selling the brands of the different oil companies, operates on actually a legal gray area. Legality is touching on licensing, source of the gas in wholesale, equipment, location, and setting. So the fact that many are able to acquire county government business permits and licenses, survive and thrive does not sanitize the legal aspect of their business. And if the law was to be strictly implemented, many of them will be forced to close or realign their businesses. In no way does this mean that the business is not viable, that there are no retailers operating within the law. Not at all. As you will see in this survey, consumption of gas is actually growing and opportunities abound in some locations. Alright, so before we get into the actual figures, we're going to look at the LPG history in Kenya. We'll look at the LPG importation and storage, what the law says about LPG business, capital, process and equipment involved, suppliers who actually can supply this LPG, your competition, opportunities in the business, and revenue as a retailer for this business. Then you look at the consumer behavior for this business, and lastly we'll touch on manpower. Okay, so trade in LPG is to a very large extent guided by the Energy Act of 2009 and regulated by the Energy Regulatory Commission. Others who have a say in different licensing aspects of the business include the local authorities and the nationwide organizations like National Environmental and Management Authority, NEMA. So prior to 2009, gas cylinders were looked to particular oil companies that marketed them. This was through company-specific cylinder valves. For instance, a Total gas cylinder valve from Total Kenya could only fit a Total gas cylinder, and so forth. As a consumer, it was not possible to actually interchange a Total cylinder with a K-gas cylinder, for example. So this meant that if you a Total gas actually ran out, you had to look for a Total petrol station for a refill. If there was a Kenol Kobil petrol station located 100 meters away from your house, the Total petrol station located 2 kilometers away, then you had no option but to transport your cylinder to the latter in exchange for another. So in 2009, the government, through legislation, decided that the gas cylinder valves were to be standardized. So out went the company specific valves, and in came the universal valves, which could be, which could fit any gas cylinder, irrespective of the brand. The standardization was partially in response to pressure from small independent oil marketers who felt without such a move, there was no way they could compete in a market dominated by big, well-funded multinationals. So officially, the main purpose of the legislation was to encourage more households to start using LPG as their source of fuel in the process of reducing consumption of kerosene and charcoal, which are deemed bad for health and harmful to the environment. So a universal valve means you as a consumer can take your Total gas to Kenol Kobil and in exchange get an equivalent K-gas cylinder and use it without any hitches. But now, what happens to the Total gas cylinder in the hands of Kenol Kobil? How does it get back to Total? So to solve the problem, a gas cylinder exchange was established. Through the exchange, oil companies could exchange and pay off each other for the cylinders they held, which didn't belong to them. So Total will pay Kenol, and to get its cylinder. At the time, in 2009, there were 6 companies who were members of the exchange. So towards the end of 2009, the oil market in the country had started becoming more liberalized, attracting relatively smaller players. So this affected the LPG market too. The adoption of the universal valve also lowered the entry barrier in the LPG business. By 2010, there were smaller players in the LPG market operating at different levels along the supply chain, from importation, transport, wholesaling, and retail. To brand and market your own brand of gas cylinders require a capacity of only 5,000 cylinders, and you also need to join the cylinder exchange pool. Other than the technical requirements to join the pool, the most significant in terms of capital is to raise a security bond of 50 million Kenya shillings. So in March 2014, there were 22 members of the pool, 6 multinationals and about 16 local companies. In April, 2 members, Pan African Petroleum and Quality Gas Limited, exited the pool after they were unable to pay for their cylinders owned by other members. To guard against abuse of the universal valve system, where companies could ride on the back of more established, popular or trusted brands, and to ensure safety standards were not compromised, a set of regulations were laid out. One of the key regulations was that a person shall not conduct a business of wholesale trade in LPG in cylinders without the authority of the brand owner. So simply this means that it is illegal to refill a branded gas cylinder without the authority of the brand owner. You're not supposed to refill a Total gas cylinder without the authority of Total Oil Company. Yet, this is one of the most contravened rules. So many legal and illegal LPG traders casually refill gas cylinders without the authority of the brand owners in a practice known as cross-filling. As long as it's a cylinder, they refill. The practice has its own advantages. Brand owners might demand a fee so as to allow a trader to refill the brand cylinder. More important, though, brand owners will insist on a strict enforcement of standards before allowing an independent wholesaler to refill the brand's cylinders. So for the wholesaler, this will mean extra investment in personnel and equipment, not to mention constant inspection by the brand owners. To avoid all these conditions and dispose the stock quickly and profitably, some wholesalers refill any cylinder that comes their way without a care whether they have authority of the brand owners or not. The downside of this is that such retailers may not enforce required quality and safety checks, and more importantly, for the consumer, such wholesalers may only partially refill the cylinder either out of their own canning or in collision retailers. So even in the universal valve, oil companies are responsible for the cylinders bearing their name and of brand. So this is one of the reasons large oil companies have been fighting cross-filling. So one, because they are concerned about the safety standards. Ideally, the cylinders still belong to them, and they are also obligated by law to make sure the cylinders are of the required standards. A cylinder should be recertified as safe and of good quality every 8 years. But when the cylinders are illegally refilled, they're out there, and the companies which owns the cylinders has no control over when or them in any manner. The company cannot certify the quality and quantity of the gas in the cylinder bearing their brand is the right one. So in case of an incident or accident, the authorized brand owner may take the blame, since the cross-filler may be nowhere to be found. The oil company may be forced to compensate victims, may even suffer a bad reputation that shakes the consumer confidence in them. So from a business perspective, the practice is deemed as unhealthy competition. Majority of the consumers are not aware of cross-filling and other workings of the LPG industry. All they want is gas. According to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics Economic Survey 2021, demand for LPG remained high and there was a further increase by about 13.9% to about 371.4 thousand tons, while that of eliminating kerosene actually continued to decline to 111.3 thousand tons in 2021. So this implies sustained use of LPG following continued government policy to promote use of clean energy. So most of LPG consumed in Kenya is imported from Bahrain and the Middle East and comes by sea. However, there is LPG coming into the country from Zambia and Tanzania, some of it through smuggling, unfortunately. So this has made it difficult to know the exact amount of LPG that is actually consumed in the country. Presently, though there is no proper capacity at the Port of Mombasa to handle importation and storage of such an amount, also the Port of Mombasa does not have the ability to dock high-capacity vessels carrying LPG. So partially, this is what has led to the illegal importation of LPG from neighboring countries. Also, it explains the occasional fluctuations in supply of LPG. In the last 3 years, the government and major oil companies have been working to establish bigger storage capacities with facilities spread across the country. So this has eased the pressure on storage, but not fully. What is the future of LPG? Big oil companies have started pushing for the introduction of company-specific valves, quoting safety concerns and revenue leakages and tax evasion by illegal wholesalers. So the government has not shown any indication of reversing the 2009 legislation. Perhaps before blanket reversal, there will be more efforts to have the ERC and other regulatory bodies like NEMA and other police reining on cross-filling and illegal refilling. Meanwhile, some companies have started experimenting with their RFIDs to trace the movement of their cylinders, so from the depot to the consumer and back. It's still early to determine the success of such efforts, and other companies are using universal but self-sealing valves, meaning the cylinder protects itself from refilling by other wholesalers. It will take quite some time for these measures to have any impact, since many cylinders are circulating within the informal channels. So despite all these hiccups, about 95% of all companies who are members of the cylinder exchange pool consider the LPG business profitable. Profits are relatively high in the business will continue to attract illegalities. Okay, so what does the law say about the LPG retailer business? So as per the Energy Regulations Act, a person wishing to engage in retail of LPG cylinders shall obtain a license from the ERC. The license application should be accompanied by a drawing approved by the local authority showing the premises of the business, a valid supply agreement with a personal license to undertake wholesale business in LPG. Other guidelines include a retailer should not purchase cylinders from an unlicensed person. A person dealing in cylinders shall not store cylinders in an enclosed area. Then every retailer selling LPG must have a properly calibrated weighing instrument in accordance with the Weights and Measures Act for the verification of the net contents of the LPG cylinders. So anyone who wishes to transport more than 40 kilograms of LPG should obtain a license from ERC. Also required is a copy of our business registration, a copy of PIN registration, a copy of VAT registration, a copy of valid tax compliance certificate, a copy of lease of agreement, a copy of clearance certificate from Chief Fire Officer, authority from brand, a copy of a valid certificate of weighing scale calibration from Weights and Measures. So what actually happens is the above is an ideal situation. More often than not, the rules are disregarded, either because retailers are not aware of the requirements in the first place, or the authorities are not strict in enforcement. Most retailers, especially outside Nairobi, operate only with the county authority business license. They don't have the fire department or ERC licenses, and there are areas also where retailers don't have weighing machines or have scales which are certified. So weighing machines should be certified by the Department of Weights and Measures, which falls under the Ministry of Trade. So usually officials go around in shopping centers checking whether scales being used are certified. A new trader is supposed to be proactive and approach the department to have her or his scale certified. So others store the cylinders in enclosed spaces contrary to the ERC requirements. Few care whether the wholesalers or they are purchasing from are operating illegally or not. As long as the wholesalers are offering attractive prices, the retailers purchase from them. Profit is the main driver. For many retailers, the increased competition in the business means any shortcut that we get increases margins and is welcome. Okay, so how much do you require to start this business? What is the process and what equipment is involved? So licenses to start an LPG retail business, the following licenses are required. One, the ERC retail license. The conditions to be met before issuance of this license are among the key conditions that the retailer should have: supply contract with a licensed LPG wholesaler. Then the license cost is about 5,000 shillings and it takes an average of about 30 days to process. You can easily apply for that license online through the ERC website, erc.go.ke. So an agreement with the wholesaler means you have to get in touch with the wholesaler already licensed by the ERC. This could be an independent wholesaler or an oil company. If an independent, then he must have authority from the oil company marketing a particular brand to refill on its behalf. Again, as noted, many gas retailers operate comfortably without the license. The ERC does not seem to have the capacity legally in terms of manpower to enforce the rule. There were plans also to establish a body to specifically regulate the LPG trade. Such a special body will definitely have more power and capacity in enforcing the existing rules or any other that could have come up or will come up in future. So should we acquire the license or not? Presently, the ERC seems to be focusing more on illegal wholesalers and less on retailers. You can survive without the license, but in the long term, it will be to your advantage if you are fully licensed. Remember, when push comes to shove, the ERC, you can't quote ignorance of the rules as a reason for not acquiring the license. So the second license requires the fire license. This license is meant to ensure that you have taken necessary measures to avoid the outbreak of a fire, and in case of one, you are able to control it. At the minimum, you should have at least one fire extinguisher which is inspected and certified, and the fire license acquired from the fire department of the local council. This averages 3,000 shillings and is advisable to acquire the license. For failure to do so will mean constant harassment by the county officials. So another license that you require is the local authority business license. So these are the normal business permit issued by the local authorities, and the price will depend on the location, size of business and county. So prices average 8,000 shillings. In the Nairobi County, government issues the license either through City Hall or decentralized offices in different locations. Sometimes getting the license can be hectic, more if you are operating near a residential building. Another license that you require is the weight and measure certification. This is a certification from the weights and measure department that your weighing machine is properly calibrated, and it costs about 1,200 shillings. Equipment do you require? One, of course, you require the gas cylinders, and like noted, gas cylinders are the property of the oil marketing companies that brand and issue them. So the companies import cylinders from countries like Thailand or buy them locally from cylinder manufacturing companies like East Africa Spectra, and then they brand, fill with gas, and then release them to the market. So selling empty cylinders is not the core business of the oil companies. The cylinders are meant to sell the gas. Thus, they never market empty cylinders, but they market the gas itself. However, quite many of the branded petrol stations will sell you empty cylinders, so the price is usually at a minimum of you can get the cylinders at 1,000 shillings from manufactured second-hand market. Then you may need to move around a bit to get a variety and enough quantity. The second-hand branded empty cylinders come from customers who, for some reasons such as financial constraints or moving houses, or other, are disposing their cylinders. So this could be through second-hand good dealers or Shylocks or brokers of sorts. Hence, the market for empties is very fragmented. However, nowadays there are brokers moving around neighborhoods looking for possible cylinder sources, such as small Shylocks and estate brokers, purchasing them, putting up a shop, a yard or something from where they sell in bulk. So some of these brokers are involved in the theft of cylinders from already operational small business outlets. They steal the cylinders, empty or filled, and resell to people joining the business or even existing ones. Cases of cylinders have increased in the past few years, and for instance, in 2012, there were about 4,000 cylinders stolen in 50 robberies across the country. Some cylinders were also stolen from East Africa Spectra, and some were recovered. So it's a murky business. So oil companies have reported cases of pirate cylinders. Usually such cylinders brought from outside the country or stolen from manufacturers, then paint the color of a particular brand. There are also retailers, when they realize a particular brand is popular and they don't have it, or they don't have enough of those cylinders, they repaint the unpopular with the color of the popular. There are also counterfeit cylinders. So these are not made by a recognized manufacturer, rather by some Juakali workshop somewhere. So they do not meet quality standards as said by the Kenya Bureau of Standards, and such cylinders could be underweight and they are not safe. So usually the fakes are painted with the colors and logos of oil marketing companies. A number of traders will purchase clean, good and fill up cylinders from the oil marketing companies themselves. Once a trader go to Kobil and purchase 10 cylinders of K-gas, which you stock and exchange with the empties consumers have. This is a relatively expensive way to acquire the cylinders. However, sometimes it's the only option. So when buying a full cylinder from a gas station, will range between 4,500 to 6,000 shillings for 6 kg, and for the second-hand empty cylinder, the prices could be negotiable to probably 1,500 to 3,000 shillings for the 6 kg. Of course, depending on the source and seller, these prices are, as I said, to vary. Thus, the way to source for cylinders is from a petrol station selling, neighborhood traders or brokers who occasionally advertise in the press and online classifieds. So alternatively, you can purchase the cylinders filled with gas from a petrol station. So that there are 3 types of gas cylinders in Kenya, and we have the 3 kg, the 6 kg and the 13 kg cylinder, which is the most preferred for middle and relatively high-end income customers. The 3 kg is also popular in low-income areas and those going for camping. There are also other sizes, though they're not very common, like the 15 kg, 25, 35, 45 and 50 kgs. The 3 and 6 kg cylinders were a late entry in the market, and previously initially it was dominated by the 13 kg cylinders. So the lower levels were introduced when the category economy looked like the future of every industry, and every company wanted to tap into the low-income groups. So a few years dealing in the smaller size of oil companies, and some traders started complaining that they were not profitable enough to continue being sustained in the market, since the cost of the cylinders was fixed and margins calculated per kilogram. The profits from 3 and 6 were not attractive enough. So the 3 kg cylinder had not proved a hit in the market, and so some of the companies had expected. Even in relatively low-income areas, the 6 kg cylinder outperformed it. In addition, the 3 kg was said to cost more in terms of frequent maintenance. The 13 kg cylinder was the best option for the companies and traders. So since 2012, some companies started phasing out the 6 kgs and they made blunt offers where they let consumers exchange the 6 kg cylinders with a 13 kg cylinder at subsidized cost. For instance, Total was exchanging the 6 kg with a 13 kg cylinder with a burner and a grill. Kobil offered the 13 kg filled with gas and a burner at 7,500, while the 6 kg was retailing at about 6,000. So the companies and traders, including retailers, were forced to reconsider their position after the 2013 budget, ready in June, followed by the financial bill in September of the same year. The government now levied VAT on LPG and other goods, thus raising its price. But this was accompanied by a rise in average inflation to about 7%. As a result of this increase in the price of basic commodities, majority of the consumers now prefer the 6 kg cylinder, and the 6 kg is the fastest moving in neighborhood gas retail shops since 2015. So you can start with a little of each, but with a bias towards the 6 kg. Now, oil companies say that Kenya has a high cylinder float, meaning that there are more cylinders that are issued than are being used. Estimates put this number of cylinders used by LPG companies at about 2.8 million, but only 1.5 are being used. So the reason could be that there are households who bought the cylinders, but when the income or economic situation changed negatively, they stopped using the LPG and went for alternative sources. So they still hold the cylinders, hoping for higher income, which will enable them to go back to using LPG. So other households have 2 cylinders, say 6 and 13, and depending on the money that is available at any particular time, they switch. Sometimes when there are shortages in the market, only one particular kind of cylinder is available, and thus, to be safe, the households keep both cylinders, even if they're using just one of them. So anything that you need is a metallic cage. This is the cage that you use to place and display the gas cylinders, and there is no standard price or single source for the structures. So gas retailers order from local blacksmiths and negotiate price depending on the preferred size. Prices actually depend and range between 5,000 to 50,000 depending on the size, design, and your negotiation skills, and probably where you're getting it done. Fire extinguishers can be bought from leading supermarkets, some hardwares and motor vehicle spare shops, or specialized fire equipment companies like Mulad Fire, Nimrod Kenya, or Dragon Fire. So prices depend on the size, and standard extinguisher ranges between 3,500 to about 20,000. A digital weighing scale, a variety of digital weighing machine dealers. Some supermarkets and hardware shops stock them. In Nairobi area around, for example, Nyamakima, Kenyaga Road and lower parts of the River Road have shops stocking them at relatively low prices. So prices start from around 20,000 all the way to 50,000 depending on the features and the make. There are 2 kinds of LPG suppliers. 1, the legal suppliers, and 2, the illegal suppliers. So when you talk about the legal suppliers or wholesalers, these are fully licensed by the ERC to conduct business of LPG in wholesale. So they include oil companies who market their own brands of cylinders and also independent wholesalers. The oil companies largely operate through petrol stations, and where those are not available, they have depots, distributors, and agents. Although petrol stations were initially hesitant to sell LPG cylinders in wholesale to neighborhood retailers, competition has made them become, increasingly more flexible. There seems to be no standards or procedure to guiding the sale of LPG in wholesale by the stations, and it depends on the individual management. So there are petrol stations who will agree to refill or to sell to you at wholesale, but only cylinders of their brand. Others will take any cylinder, while others will not sell in wholesale at all and advise you to contact the mother company. If we start, just approach the station in the area and they will advise you. You can also approach oil companies directly. They will give you terms to do with safety, deposits, and obligations. And oil companies will prefer to deal with the retailer who meets the ERC LPG license conditions. So price and discounts will depend on your location and quantities you move every week. So they will require you to sign a contract that you will not deal with the rival products. And depending on your agreement, the company could be delivering the cylinders to your premises. So the major advantage of this is that you might enjoy quite high margins. So sometimes margins big enough to allow you to become actually a sort of a wholesaler to other retailers or small outlets. And many retailers are reluctant to deal with oil companies directly for fearing the bureaucracy involved. The independent wholesalers have depots in various parts of the country. Others deliver filled cylinders to your premises. Some of the wholesalers are not very structured, and so depending on your location, you give them a call and they will let you know the exact location of the depot or distributor. Usually the independent wholesalers deal in a wide range of cylinders. The other type of wholesalers or suppliers are illegal ones, and these are illegal either because they are dealing with smuggled gas or because they are filling cylinders without the authority of the brand owners. So illegal refillers operate from various spaces, sometimes even within a private homestead. In Nairobi, a number of such wholesalers are found in Nairobi industrial area, Donholm area, Makasi, Babadogo, and some don't even have business names, just a storage tank and refilling facility. So retailers are attracted to such wholesalers because it's a walk-in and walk-out affair, no questions asked. Such wholesalers are also flexible enough to collude with. If a retailer, you want partial fillings, which is wrong for the customers. Some oil companies estimate that about 30% of the LPG that is presently consumed in the country comes from the black market, as compared to 10%. For example, in the year 2013, police and ERC officials confiscated about 408 cylinders from illegal wholesalers in industrial area. The ERC has been promising to crack down on the illegal wholesalers, but nothing significant has happened. Ideally, authentic cylinders filled by the oil companies themselves or licensed wholesalers should have a test date engraved on the collar rim, a new sticker from supplier, as well as a branded seal. However, such safeguards are easy to counterfeit, and many consumers don't know what to look for in order to ascertain whether a refill cylinder is authentic or not. Then for your supplier, the first thing to do is contact the neighborhood stations or oil companies themselves, and they will give you a pointer depending on your location. Also get in touch with the independent wholesalers whose contacts are readily available online, and when you start operations, representatives of legal and illegal sellers will come to you. So some wholesalers will pick your cylinders and fill as you ate, while others will exchange with pre-filled cylinders. Some of the illegal wholesalers do not deliver to your premises, so you just need to think of how to transport and take care of the risk yourself. Competition in the gas retail business has accelerated over the past few years, and individual retailers got into the business in the 2009s when oil marketing companies were forced to adapt the universal valve. The market opened up and more players came in at different levels, including importers, distributors, and wholesalers. So many of the initial retailers played by the rules, refilling from respective oil companies or the agents. Slowly, as competition increased at all levels and some crafty entrepreneurs identified loopholes in the market, they exploited them considerably, reducing barriers to entry in the business. So competition has been driven by an increase in demand for LPG and by urban consumers. Again, the universal valve and intense marketing by the oil companies played a part in this. The positive economic growth during the different regions that we've had increased the number of people who could afford the gas cylinders. So in the initial days, the biggest barrier to entry was the relatively vast of sourcing from the oil companies. However, with the rise of numerous legal and illegal independent wholesalers, this stopped being a big problem. LPG retail business thrives in urban areas as compared to rural and peri-urban areas. So this is because in the rural areas, alternative sources of energy such as firewood and charcoal are easily available at a fair price. And in some other areas, like in the informal settlement areas, mostly households use kerosene or paraffin as an alternative source of energy. So income is also relatively low and erratic in rural and informal areas. The more urbanized a region is, the higher the consumption of LPG. In addition to Nairobi and other areas which are highly urbanized, according to Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, Kiambu, Eldoret, Mombasa, Nakuru, Kisumu, Bungoma, Kakamega, Kisii, and most of Central Province are also urbanized and are at above average rate. So about 60% of the LPG market in Nairobi and about 15 to 20% in Mombasa and 25% in other growing urban areas. So Nairobi is about 40% of the users use LPG as the primary fuel, meaning they don't substitute with other fuels. So the rest mix LPG and other fuels. So the lower the income, the higher the rate of substitution with alternatives. For such households, LPG is used for cooking, light meals, preparing quick snacks for visitors or warming food. Yeah, the largest segment of LPG users are those in the middle and upper income groups, totaling about 2 billion people. Although the use of LPG in rural areas is low, it does not provide a very attractive virgin market, considering that about 8% of people in the rural areas do not purchase fuel at all. They collect freely available firewood or burn charcoal for themselves. So despite rural consumers appreciating the advantages of LPG as over firewood or charcoal, they are reluctant to incur an extra cost associated with gas. The biggest potential market for LPG is in the areas where consumers already purchase fuel of any kind, be it kerosene, charcoal, or even firewood. So such will make a cost and convenience calculations which will make LPG attractive. So growing urban areas, lower, middle, and low income areas in Nairobi offering long-term potential for growth. And however, the biggest concentration of consumers already using LPG are in the middle class estates. So looking at the percentage of income of any group using LPG, you will note consumption is biased towards the middle and high income groups. So in Nairobi, for racial segmentation, people earning between 20 to 30K tend to live in the same general neighborhood. And households earning 10K mostly live in the low income but highly populated areas. So with the incomes above 50K, the market is a bit segmented. Most of the upcoming essays in Nairobi are targeting households whose income is over 50K. Outside Nairobi, in areas like Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, residential areas tend to be segmented in three major ways. So those earning 10K and below in the same neighborhood, those earning 10 and 20K in another, and above 20K in more prestigious neighborhoods or areas. For the low-income groups, the biggest hindrance to adopting LPG is the initial investment in the equipment. So basically the cylinder and cooker or grill and burner. So these are gradually changing with secondary trading cylinders. For instance, a 6 kg gas can cost between 6,000 to 7,000. On hand market, one can get that at a lower price with a burner at 4,000 to 5,000. Also, competition in the LPG market becomes intense. Some oil companies are reducing their prices with the hope of capturing a bigger share of the market. There are also schemes, though not very consistent, aimed at giving soft loans to the low-income earners in order to purchase the cylinder and burner. The impact has not been significant. By and large, most consumers in urban areas and a significant part of the rural are aware of the LPG and the advantages it offers compared to alternatives. To the urban consumers, LPG is an aspirational fuel, meaning those who can afford it presently because of income will switch when the income situation improves. Meaning those who can't afford it presently because of income will rather switch when the economic situation improves. For some, though, the reluctance to use LPG is because of fears about safety, partial refilling, and contamination of fuel. At the national level, only between 5 to 7% of households use LPG as a primary fuel. Of the 21% are in the urban areas and 1% in the rural areas. So overall, LPG use, including those who use it as a primary fuel and those who use with alternatives, is between 7 and 10%. So in rural areas and developing urban areas, one of the reasons that make LPG less attractive is the hassle required to get a refill. Due to relatively low population density, retailers are sparsely distributed. So overall, most consumers in urban areas and a significant part of the rural are aware of LPG and the advantages it offers compared to the other fuel alternatives. Now, competition is on the rise and will continue to do so in the short term. So, sometime until the end of 2015, although increased competition reduces profits and makes our business less attractive to entrepreneurs, LPG retail is continuing to attract more investors. There are markets which are almost reaching saturation with up to 3 retailers serving about 200 households compared to a more likely break-even point of about 300 households per retailer. Now, competition in the business will slow down if the ERC decides to strictly implement the regulations governing the sale of LPG. The Energy Bill 2014 proposed a fine of 1 million shillings for anyone dealing with LPG illegally. Presently, there's a fine of 5,000. This will squeeze out the illegal wholesalers who are actually ensured higher margins and less bureaucratic way of refilling. While it might not be possible to fully regulate the market, in about 2 years there will be likely more regulations and bureaucracy in setting up gas retail points, making it an attractive business for many. So before that happens, competition will continue to increase. So this will be triggered by copycat entrepreneurship. There are many people starting this business. It must be profitable. Let me start it too. Yeah. So before you get into it, make sure that you get your facts right, do your own research, and see whether it's a business that you want to be involved in. From the outside, the energy sector looks attractive to many entrepreneurs. Low entry barriers will make it an option for small-scale entrepreneurs seeking investment opportunities. So in the medium and long term, competition could reduce because of changes in consumer behavior and strategies of the oil companies. The ERC also plans to carry a sensitization campaign on the media that will educate consumers on the need to purchase gas from recognized outlets, the dangers of buying from illegal retailers, and what to look for in order to be sure whether the cylinder has been filled legally or illegally. So already there are neighborhood gas retailers have acquired a bad reputation due to partial refilling, and such a campaign might just tilt a significant number of consumers to reputable outlets like petrol stations. So there are also plans by some companies like Hashi to introduce piped gas in houses. Also, a number of oil companies are thinking of developing partial filling mechanisms in the states. This might reduce the margins of existing retailers and make the business less attractive. Alright, so is there an opportunity in this business? Of course, yes, opportunities exist in this business. Opportunities could be by filling gaps in existing locations or getting into completely new markets. So locations where the population is growing due to upcoming residential areas or other economic attractions offer an opportunity, and so are upcoming completely new estates. Prevailing economic growth and inflation rates will determine the viability of the business in areas populated by the lower and middle income areas. And if we look at how prices have been shifting from 2017 to 2021, definitely there is business in this area, and so these groups of consumers radically change their consumption if the inflation rates changes. So a rise in inflation, we'll always see them cut their spending, and from past trends, LPG is one of the casualties. I remember like in the 2013, the inflation rate was relatively higher compared to the previous year, and in 2015, the average inflation rate was 7.3 compared to 6.4 and 6.27 in March, and a consistent rise in the inflation rate will discourage prospective new consumers from investing in the cylinders. So opportunities in low-income areas will be based on service differentiation and, more importantly, the ability to compete on price. So in most of the markets, there tends to be a dominating gas retailer, and this is the retailer controlling more than a fair share of the market. Such a retailer could have become dominating because of his marketing efforts or reputation or location, or as is increasingly becoming common, having branches in all the key positions within an estate or region. So markets with a dominating retailer are harder to penetrate, and so are those with a strategically located form or big outlet like a supermarket or petrol station. So gas for households consumption per se is not a differentiated product. It's more or less from the same source and produces the same amount of heat. Well, this means that competition is based not on the product itself, but factors influencing how the product gets to the consumer. At the national level, oil companies compete by marketing. They make very big efforts to hook first-time LPG consumers to their brand, hoping that they will become faithful in the long run. As for the existing consumers, they will sell the superiority of the brand and service in order to keep them loyal. They also try to position their outlets in places as convenient to the customer as possible. So on what is competition based on? Basically at the local level where the retailer is selling all the common brands, competition is not based on brand advantages, rather a combination of factors all aimed at making the consumer choose to purchase from the retailer rather than the oil company outlet or the retailer next door. So these factors include, for example, location, a location where there's a critical number of potential customers. This could be in an area where the population is growing due to upcoming buildings, economic attractions such as a new company setting up, social attractions such as a security or completely new estate. It's also a location where people have adequate income to invest in LPG and where alternative and cheaper sources of energy like firewood are not easily available. So location in relation to the convenience of the customer. Gas often finishes or gets finished without any notice. You might be in the middle of cooking and pop, it pops twice and it goes out. A person will want to purchase the gas soonest possible and from the nearest location. So gas cylinders are always bulky and related heavy items. This means a few customers want to carry it around, especially if they don't have an own means of transport. Thus, the gas retail outlets which try to locate to the customer as near as possible. And this could be on the ground floor of a flat, along past shopping center, a market. And for new retailers, location is important. However, location on its own is not enough to make a business succeed. If by appearance the new conveniently located an outlet does not instill confounded, then customers will opt to walk the extra mile to the usual outlet. So reliability and trust is another issue among consumers, and there is already default skepticism about neighborhood gas retailers. Largely this is based on whether the gas is of the right quantity. And although many retailers have a weighing scale on which a consumer can confirm the true weight of the filled gas cylinder, many customers believe that the scales have been tampered with and are not giving a true reflection of the weight. So the only proof that the weight is correct is if the gas lasts for the duration that is expected. The issue base is usually a refill that had done at a petrol station or a supermarket. So building an element of trust in a market where there is intense competition is crucial for the success of the business. Though at first this may mean lower profits compared to short-changing customers, it helps build a reputation and a level of faith. A retailer who enters the market, and although marketing stresses these cylinders are filled to the correct quantities, has a big chance of gaining a fair share of customers, keeping all other factors constant. So reliability is also in terms of opening and closing hours. Why will I carry around a 13 kg to a shop only to find it closed? Then if I want a gas at 9 p.m. or 7 in the morning, can I get it? So consistency in opening and closing hours adds value to the business, and if a retailer has erratic working hours, then they will lose the trust of the consumers. Availability of various brands, and there are customers who want to use only particular brands. So if they have a K or a Total gas, then they want to exchange with the Total gas, even though another one could work fine. Thus, a retailer who has a variety of most of the common brands always will have a competitive edge. Service is also another area where involves courtesy and attention that the customer receives. It's also about such factors such as picking and delivering the gas where applicable. The latter is increasingly becoming a crucial consideration when making purchases, especially in locations where the retailer is located at a distance from a customer's house, or if the customer lives on an upper floor of a flat. So staff of some retailer shops go ahead and help the customer connect the new cylinder, and these simple things are noted not just by existing customers but by potential customers. Presently, there are no radical innovations in the service. Picking and delivering are easily copied by competitors if they have the capital to invest in facilities such as motorcycle or extra manpower. So marketing is another area, although it may involve all the other efforts. We focus on direct marketing efforts like advertising and efforts at branding. So advertising the business takes some common, easily replicable forms. One is to use small billboards pointing to the existence of the gas retailer. Another one is to use stickers in shops, gates, public vehicles, toilets, corridors in residential areas, and any other available public spaces. So often such advertisements commonly highlight location, affordability, and free delivery. So few touch on other attributes that are important to the consumer, and safety, right quantities, late opening, and help in connecting. There is room to crude branding around issues of safety and quantity. So other forms of advertising include leaflets, posters, and in a few cases online classifieds, either through the free classified websites like GG or Facebook, Instagram. The effectiveness of the latter depends on whether the retailers are able to narrow down to the target customer, as well as it depends on if through the ad the retailer offers the potential customer, say a customer in Buruburu, something exceptional not available in that location, or otherwise it will pass just for another advertisement. So this is because consumption of gas is on a need basis. A consumer won't see an ad of a discounted gas and rush to buy even when the cylinder is not empty. So a few retailers have used advertising methods and avenues not commonly used by other retailers. One used a vernacular radio station, for example, Another has posters that declare that you can even come with your weighing machine. Another asks customers not to spend a shilling calling us, just text or flash and we'll call you back. So the owner of another moved from door to door, giving leaflets and where possible, talking to the potential customers about his business. So branding efforts are aimed at making the customer associate the retailer with some positive attributes. So it's also being used. Simple branding efforts include giving workers branded overalls, cleaning, branding and naming the business, issuing well-branded materials like receipts. Most interesting marketing by a gas retailer in Nairobi is to offer a loyalty scheme where a customer earns points with every purchase, and if they're introducing a new customer, the customer earns a discount when he gets the accumulated points, or points accumulate to a certain number. Now, another retailer estimates the duration that it will take a consumer to empty the gas purchased and sends them a text, and then sends them a friendly marketing text a few days to the probable gas finished date. So price-based competition is also important, considering when purchasing gas. This is more so in low and mid-income areas. Price-based competition is common in some areas where differences tend to be between 20 to 100 shillings. Now, when the price is too low as compared to competition, customers will be skeptical about the quantity or the quality of the gas. On the other hand, higher prices do not instill confidence that the gas is of the correct amount. This is because of the skepticism that already exists. So where retailers are located at a considerable distance from the customer's home, they consider price in terms of the extra service like delivery. If one retailer is offering a lower price and another one is slightly higher price, but with the delivery, they may opt for the latter. Now, price-based competition works if supported by other efforts to win customers, but it is a good strategy for market entry. Now, customer loyalty in the business is not deep-rooted and depends on customers' perception of convenience, reliability, and trust of the retailer. Alright, so gas at both wholesale and retail is priced per kilogram, and the price per kilogram varies with the source. Still, at any one time, the general ranges where price oscillates, irrespective of whether you are sourcing from the informal or formal or legal or illegal markets. So the margins range between 10 to 20% per kg, and at present, I think you are going at about 202 shillings per kg. So the difference in margins depends on the wholesaler, although price fluctuates at a retailer market, an average of 150 for the 6 kg cylinder and about 300 for the 13 kg cylinder. So the average range per kilogram is between 20 to 35 shillings. A notable exception is when a retailer has a contract directly with the oil company to buy certain quantities every month, and in this case the margins might be slightly higher. So illegal, informal and informal wholesalers tend to offer slightly lower prices. This is by a margin of between 5 to 12 in some cases. However, some slightly higher prices after considering the competition in the area and the hassle they are saving the retailer. So the best thing is to shop around. So when a retailer is purchasing from an oil company, usually through a petrol station, the margin tend to be within the same range, depending on the market conditions. And some petrol stations will only sell LPGs in wholesale when cylinders belong to them. And however, some will refill all cylinders effective of brand. So when refilling those cylinders for rival brands, they charge about 40 to 60 shillings per cylinder. So the revenue a retailer makes will depend on the total number of cylinders he sells or she sells at the end of the month, and the margins and how he is able to control his costs. So number of cylinders a retailer sells will depend on factors mentioned earlier, but keeping everything constant, it will depend on the residents' income and the general economic welfare at the national level. So the higher the income, the less likelihood that the household will use alternative sources like charcoal and kerosene. This means that they will use higher quantities of gas. So in lower income areas, LPG is used sparingly to warm food and cook light meals. Thus, the cylinders last relatively longer. Gas retailers located in high populated areas, whether populated by middle or lower income areas, record higher revenues. When inflation rates rise, consumers' disposable income reduces, meaning that they will reduce their spending, and this will try reducing the amount of gas they spend. And if they have an option, they will go for the lower quantities. Say if a consumer is using 13 kg and has a 6 kg cylinder which was unused before, they might probably want to revert to the lower amount. So in higher income areas, there are more consumers with 13 kg cylinders. These are more profitable. So for this business, charging prices above your local competition has a negative impact on revenue, unless the retailer is offering a significant advantage. For instance, if customers trust a retailer, quantities are as required, delivers while others don't, or is conveniently located compared to the competition. Without any comparative advantage, then a higher price will have a negative impact on revenue. Charging below average market price also does not have a positive impact on revenue unless the customer trusts that the quantities offered by the retailer are right and it does not compromise on service. So sales tend to be higher towards the end of the month, and it's good to have enough stock then. This is because in addition to customer purchasing their usual refills, there are those whose gas got finished within the month but didn't have the money to refill, and so at the end of the month they are able to refill. So at what point do you break even? This takes about 8 months for this business, or the length could be shorter if you are in a highly populated middle income location and with little or no competition, but it's good to plan with the longer break-even duration. And before you break even, turn a profit, and the business becomes sustainable, you need to have money to pay rent, pay your bills. Alright, so these are the majority of the consumers for the product, the mostly the ones who will be engaged in refilling and knowing when it is and women are more particular about things like checking the weights of the gas than men. Sometimes they check even when the cylinder is clean, or its general condition, or whether it's has dents, it's old. Women or ladies too will worry much more about picking and delivery of the gas cylinders, so they are more likely to purchase from a retailer who picks and delivers and where possible helps in reconnecting. So that said, even men are concerned about the above, but to a lesser extent. So right quantities are especially crucial for both. Often, if the customers are dissatisfied, they will move on to the next retailer without letting their current retailer know why. And women or ladies are more likely to complain, spread the word of poor service to friends, and then walk away. So generally, customers seek a fair price, and it's not necessarily the lowest, but one within market ranges and corresponds to service. Secondly, they seek convenience, and they want to know that they can purchase gas at the most convenient location relative to their homes and time. And last but not least, they're also looking at a great service. They appreciate common courtesy, and service additions to such delivery. So consumer behavior goes a long way in success to this business, considering you are more likely to make more sales if your customers stick with you. So let's talk about labor. In cases where the owner is not running the business himself, most of the gas retailers tend to have at least 2 employees. So one is the manager or the cashier is sort of, and while the other is an assistant doing the actual exchange of the cylinders, and sometimes even doing the deliveries. So there are retailers who have only 1 employee other than the owner, and many of such do not offer delivery services. The customer brings his empty cylinder and leaves with a refilled one. How they get it to their house is their own to work out. So the common reward method is a monthly salary, and there are a few retailers who pay employees a commission based on cylinder sold. This more so for those doing delivery, and this be between 20 shillings per cylinder. In the long run, it becomes profitable to hire them. The number of employees that a retailer has depends on how busy an outlet is. So for a few employees in a busy outlet will compromise service, as to customers will have to wait longer before they are served. Among considerations while hiring assistants is ability to ride a motorcycle or a bicycle, an understanding of the neighborhood, trust, and customer handling capabilities, and soft spoken skills. So these are some of the things that make a difference in this business. So the lowest salary has been recorded to be about 4,000 shillings, and my highest record is about 16,000, but this varies depending on the location and the size of the business. I hope that you have learned 1 or 2 things, and I'll see you in the next video.